My photo taste is the Pinterest because they are the best.
From bbclearningenglish.com.
Hello and welcome to 6 Minute English. I'm Finn.
And I'm Neil. Hello.
Now, Neil, are you doing anything interesting tonight?
Well, I was thinking of popping down to, that means visiting, my local pub to catch a band. What about you?
Well, my wife and I have got tickets for the proms tonight.
Ah, the proms. You mean that ceremony for high school leavers? I thought you left school decades ago, Finn.
Oh, yes, very funny, Neil. Actually, yeah, it was almost 2 decades ago. Anyway, the proms I'm talking about have nothing to do with that. These proms, or as they're also known, the BBC proms, are the biggest classical music festival in the world, and they're held in London every summer.
Ah, yes, of course, I know the proms. And I've even watched the last night of the proms with all those waving flags and the patriotic singing by the audience. Yeah, not really my thing.
I know what you mean, but you shouldn't judge the proms by the concert on the last night, Neil. It's not really typical. Although it is watched by millions of people around the world. And, you know, the proms is also a very old festival. But how old, Neil? Is it A, 57 years, B, 84 years, or C, 120 years old?
Well, I don't know, so I'm going to guess and say 84 years.
Okay, well, we'll find out the answer to that question later.
Okay, so come on then, Finn. Sell the proms to me. What is it that I'm missing?
Well, rather a lot, actually. You know, it's not stuck up. That means a bit superior. In fact, I think there's something for everyone. For example, you might hear something like this.
Wow, that was pretty dramatic. It really grips you, doesn't it? What was it?
Well, that was the first movement of Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony. And at the end, you would hear the prommers showing their appreciation by cheering and clapping.
Right, so it's almost like Glastonbury then. So that's the point you're making, is it? The proms make classical music accessible to everyone. But who are these prommers?
Well, for an answer to that, let's hear from the director of the BBC proms, Edward Blakeman.
So the prommers are quite literally the people who stand to listen to the concerts, and there's space for about 800 people right in the middle of the hall. And this is a long tradition back going through the proms, and it's wonderful because it costs very little. And it means that almost anyone can afford to come to the proms. So it is a wonderful place for all sorts of people to meet together. And by the way, it's the best place in the hall to hear the music.
Now, the hall that he's talking about is the Royal Albert Hall in London. And the prommers are the people who come and stand as they listen to the music. You know, Neil, it's only £5 a ticket.
Oh, right, so you stand. That sounds like a proper gig. I think I might give it a go, Finn. So you've been trying to persuade me that it's quite informal, but at the same time you do get all those big, fancy classical music names, don't you?
You do, absolutely. The top soloists. Now, whether that's on the piano, the violin, or any other instrument, or singing, they all perform at the proms, as do very big orchestras.
And I believe the BBC commissions new works from time to time. I was even told about rock musicians playing there. Can that be right, Finn?
Well, yes, Neil, that's actually true. The whole range of music is becoming wider year by year. They also screen concerts to other cities. They hold lunchtime and children's concerts. They even play Indian classical music, like this type of thing.
What, playing sitars and tablas at the proms?
Yes, but the core of the 8-week festival is devoted to the heavyweight composers of the last 400 years. Names like Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, Brahms, and so on. Let me play you another extract of that Tchaikovsky symphony now, Neil. Tell me what you think of this.
Now that was totally different, much slower and quite sad.
Yes, every symphony, concerto or sonata will have a slow movement, and it will often be deeply emotional.
Well, you can't beat live music, so I must get going.
Oh yeah? Are you off to see that gig at the pub, Neil?
Actually, yes. Or you know what? I might go and catch a prom after all.
Okay, well, before you hurry off, I have to give you the answer to the quiz. I asked, how many years has the BBC Proms been going?
And I said 84.
And I'm sorry, Neil, that's the wrong answer.
Oh, no.
The correct answer was actually 120 years. Well, that brings us to the end of today's 6-Minute English. We hope you enjoyed the programme. Join us again soon. Bye.
Goodbye.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
6-Minute English from bbclearningenglish.com.
Hello and welcome to 6-Minute English. I'm Finn.
And I'm Neil. Hello.
Now, Neil, are you doing anything interesting tonight?
Well, I was thinking of popping down to, that means visiting, my local pub to catch a band. What about you?
Well, my wife and I have got tickets for the proms tonight.
Ah, the proms. You mean that ceremony for high school leavers? I thought you left school decades ago, Finn.
Oh, yes, very funny, Neil. Actually, yeah, it was almost 2 decades ago. Anyway, the proms I'm talking about have nothing to do with that. These proms, or as they're also known, the BBC Proms, are the biggest classical music festival in the world, and they're held in London every summer.
Ah, yes, of course, I know the proms. And I've even watched the last night of the proms with all those waving flags and the patriotic...
My photo taste is the Pinterest because they are the best. Flick to link, a link to flick.
I'm here today to talk to you about a very powerful little word, one that people will do almost anything to avoid becoming. Billion-dollar industries thrive because of the fear of it, and those of us who undeniably are it are left to navigate a relentless storm surrounding it. I'm not sure if any of you have noticed, but I'm fat. Not the lowercase muttered behind my back kind, or the seemingly harmless chubby or cuddly. I'm not even the more sophisticated voluptuous or curvaceous kind. Let's not sugarcoat it. I am the capital F-A-T kind of fat. I am the elephant in the room. When I walked out on stage, some of you may have been thinking, oh, this is going to be hilarious, because everybody knows that fat people are funny. Or you may have been thinking, where does she get her confidence from? Because a confident fat woman is almost unthinkable. The fashion-conscious members of the audience may have been thinking how fabulous I look in this Beth Ditto dress. Thank you very much. Where some of you might have thought, oh, black would have been so much more slimming. You may have wondered, consciously or not, if I have diabetes, or a partner, or if I eat carbs after 7 p.m. You may have worried that you ate carbs after 7 p.m. last night and that you really should renew your gym membership. These judgments are insidious. They can be directed at individuals and groups, and they can also be directed at ourselves. And this way of thinking is known as fat phobia. Like any form of systematic oppression, fat phobia is deeply rooted in complex structures like capitalism, patriarchy, and racism. And that can make it really difficult to see, let alone challenge. We live in a culture where being fat is seen as being a bad person. Lazy, greedy, unhealthy, irresponsible, and morally suspect. And we tend to see thinness as being universally good, responsible, successful, and in control of our appetites, bodies, and lives. We see these ideas again and again in the media, in public health policy, doctors' offices, in everyday conversations, and in our own attitudes. We may even blame fat people themselves for the discrimination they face because, after all, if we don't like it, we should just lose weight. Easy. This anti-fat bias has become so integral, so ingrained to how we value ourselves and each other, that we rarely question why we have such contempt for people of size and where that disdain comes from. But we must question it, because the enormous value we place on how we look affects every one of us. And do we really want to live in a society where people are denied their basic humanity if they don't subscribe to some arbitrary form of acceptable? So when I was 6 years old, my sister used to teach ballet to a bunch of little girls in our garage. I was about a foot taller and a foot wider than most of the group. When it came to doing our first performance, I was so excited about wearing a pretty pink tutu. I was going to sparkle. As the other girls slipped easily into their lycra and shawl creations, not one of the tutus was big enough to fit me. I was determined not to be excluded from the performance. So I turned to my mother and, loud enough for everyone to hear, said, "Mum, I don't need a tutu. I need a 4-4. Thanks, Mum. And although I didn't recognise it at the time, claiming space for myself in that glorious 4-4 was the first step towards becoming a radical fat activist. Now, I'm not saying that this whole body love thing has been an easy skip along a glittering path of self-acceptance since that day in class. Far from it. I soon learnt that living outside what the mainstream considers normal can be a frustrating and isolating place. I've spent the last 20 years unpacking and deprogramming these messages, and it's been quite the roller coaster. I've been openly laughed at, abused from passing cars, and been told that I'm delusional. I also receive smiles from strangers who recognise what it takes to walk down the street with a spring in your step and your head held high. Thanks. And through it all, that fierce little 6-year-old has stayed with me, and she has helped me stand before you today as an unapologetic fat person. A person that simply refuses to subscribe to the dominant narrative about how I should move through the world in this body of mine. And I'm not alone. I am part of an international community of people who choose to, rather than passively accepting that our bodies are, and probably always will be big, we actively choose to flourish in these bodies as they are today. People who honour our strength and work with, not against, our perceived limitations. People who value health as something much more holistic than a number on an outdated BMI chart. Instead, we value mental health, self-worth, and how we feel in our bodies as vital aspects to our overall well-being. People who refuse to believe that living in these fat bodies is a barrier to anything, really. There are doctors, academics, and bloggers who have written countless volumes on the many facets of this complex subject. There are fashionistas who reclaim their bodies and their beauty by wearing fat bikinis and crop tops, exposing the flesh that we're all taught to hide. There are fat athletes who run marathons, teach yoga, or do kickboxing, all done with a middle finger firmly held up to the status quo. And these people have taught me that radical body politics is the antidote to our body-shaming culture. But to be clear, I'm not saying that people shouldn't change their bodies if that's what they want to do. Reclaiming yourself can be one of the most gorgeous acts of self-love and can look like a million different things. From hairstyles to tattoos to body contouring to hormones to surgery and yes, even weight loss. It's simple. It's your body and you decide what's best to do with it. My way of engaging in activism is by doing all the things that we fatties aren't supposed to do, and there's a lot of them, inviting other people to join me, and then making art about it. The common thread through most of this work has been reclaiming spaces that are often prohibitive to bigger bodies. From the catwalk to club shows, from public swimming pools to prominent dance stages. And reclaiming spaces en masse is not only a powerful artistic statement, but a radical community building approach. This was so true of Aquaporco, the Fat Femme synchronised swim team I started with a group of friends in Sydney. The impact of seeing a bunch of defiant fat women in flowery swimming caps and bathers throwing their legs in the air without a care should not be underestimated. Throughout my career, I have learnt that fat bodies are inherently political, and unapologetic fat bodies can blow people's minds. When director Kate Champion of acclaimed dance theatre company Force Majeure asked me to be the artistic associate on a work featuring all fat dancers, I literally jumped at the opportunity. And I mean literally. Nothing to Lose is a work made in collaboration with performers of size who drew from their lived experiences to create a work as varied and authentic as we all are. And it was as far from ballet as you could imagine. The very idea of a fat dance work by such a prestigious company was, to put it mildly, controversial, because nothing like it had ever been done on mainstream dance stages before, anywhere in the world. People were sceptical. What do you mean, fat dancers? Like size 10, size 12 kind of fat? Where did they do their dance training? Are they going to have the stamina for a full-length production? But despite the scepticism, Nothing to Lose became a sell-out hit of Sydney Festival. We received rave reviews, toured, won awards, and were written about in over 27 languages. These incredible images of our cast were seen worldwide. I've lost count of how many times people of all sizes have told me that the show has changed their lives, how it helped them shift their relationship to their own and other people's bodies, and how it made them confront their own bias. But of course, work that pushes people's buttons is not without its detractors. I have been told that I'm glorifying obesity. I have received violent death threats and abuse for daring to make work that centres fat people's bodies and lives and treats us as worthwhile human beings with valuable stories to tell. I've even been called the ISIS of the obesity epidemic. A comment so absurd that it is funny, but it also speaks to the panic, the literal terror that the fear of fat can evoke. It is this fear that's feeding the diet industry, which is keeping so many...
Flick to link, a link to flick. My photo taste is the Pinterest, because they are the best.
From bbclearningenglish.com.
Hello and welcome to 6 Minute English. I'm Finn.
And I'm Neil. Hello.
Now, Neil, are you doing anything interesting tonight?
Well, I was thinking of popping down to, that means visiting, my local pub to catch a band. What about you?
Well, my wife and I have got tickets for the proms tonight.
Ah, the proms. You mean that ceremony for high school leavers? I thought you left school decades ago, Finn.
Oh, yes, very funny, Neil. Actually, yeah, it was almost 2 decades ago. Anyway, the proms I'm talking about have nothing to do with that. These proms, or as they're also known, the BBC proms, are the biggest classical music festival in the world, and they're held in London every summer.
Ah, yes, of course, I know the proms. And I've even watched the last night of the proms with all those waving flags and the patriotic singing by the audience. Yeah, not really my thing.
I know what you mean, but you shouldn't judge the proms by the concert on the last night, Neil. It's not really typical. Although it is watched by millions of people around the world. And, you know, the proms is also a very old festival. But how old, Neil? Is it A, 57 years, B, 84 years, or C, 120 years old?